he got through to working class people all over Nebraska. It was an extraordinary campaign, and it tells me that the American people are sick and tired of seeing the rich get richer. They think billionaires dominate both political parties. They want real change, and Dan's campaign raised those issues in a very significant way. Nichols says, in your post-election email Saturday, you suggested that activists should explore backing at least some independent candidates, especially in red states where the Democratic brand looks to be a tough sell. You're not talking about creating a third party or creating a new political grouping, are you? Bernie says, not right now, no. What I am saying is that building off of Dan Osborne's campaign, first of all, we need strong working class candidates who are prepared to run on working class issues. That's number one. Number two, where people can run in the Democratic primary and win, that's fine. Where it is more advantageous to run as an independent outside of the Democratic primary process, we should do that as well. At the end of the day, in a three-way race, it takes 35% of the vote to win. So if you have a strong progressive candidate running on economic issues, do I think that in certain circumstances, that candidate can defeat establishment Democrats and Republicans? The answer is yes. So Nichols says, you're comfortable with challenges that take on both parties? Bernie says, absolutely. So let me break down for you what this all means. Bernie's saying, look, in some circumstances, it's actually better to run as an independent than it is to run as a Democrat. So first, let's talk about the presidential level. At the presidential level, that is absolutely not the case, and anybody who tells you otherwise has no idea what they're talking about. Ask RFK how it went running as an independent. Right? He started as a Democrat, then he switched to independent. And the problem with running as an independent is you're starting from scratch when it comes to ballot access. You're excluded from the debates. And it's almost like they really purposefully tried to rig it up front. After Ross Perot ran as an independent and got 19% of the vote and basically turned the election over to Bill Clinton, they said the Democratic and Republican parties got together and said, never again. We're never going to let an independent at the national level do this to us again. So you need one of the two major party infrastructures at the national level to run and win for president. And this is the exact calculation that Bernie made in 2016, when even though he's an independent, he ran as a Democrat, and exactly the calculation he made in 2020, where, again, even though he's an independent, he ran as a Democrat. And he got way closer as a Democrat than he ever would have gotten running as an independent, because he understands it is colossally rigged against independents at the presidential level. So, at the presidential level, he's not really talking about that. And his own track record proves that that's not what he's referring to. Even when you talk about safe blue seats or lean blue seats, in that scenario, it wouldn't make sense to run as an independent unless there literally is no Democratic candidate. In that scenario, sure, you could run as an independent. But in a blue seat, if you have a Democrat versus a Republican versus an independent, what would happen is the independent and the Democrat would split their vote, and then the Republican will be able to get in there with fewer votes than they would have had to otherwise if there was just one candidate, because you're splitting the left of center vote and the populist vote on the Democratic side, which allows the Republican to win much easier. So I don't even think he's not even referring to doing that in blue states. The model he's referring to here, Dan Osborne, this guy was in a deep red state of Nebraska, hardcore Republican state. A Democrat would have gotten absolutely blown out of the water in a way that Dan Osborne just didn't, right? He got 47% of the vote. As somebody who's pretty lefty in a red state, that's what Bernie is referring to here. And that actually makes perfect sense. Because you know the Democrat has no chance of winning. They're literally not even running a Democrat. And so this dude ran as an independent and ran against both parties. Now, by the way, let's talk about his actual policies and what he believes and what he ran on. In some ways, he was to the left of the Democrats when it comes to unions, when it comes to progressive economic policy. This is a guy who's all in on social democracy, making the government work for the people. You know, higher minimum wage, PRO Act, things of that nature. I don't know if he ran on universal health care, but I wouldn't be surprised if he ran on universal health care. You guys can comment below. But he had populist rhetoric against both parties, and he ran on progressive economic issues. Now, having said that, there were plenty of things that he said that actually would piss off the Democratic base, because on social issues, he genuinely ran kind of to the right. In fact, he even released an ad where he tried to make it seem like the Republican candidate is less pro-Trump than he is. That's kind of wild. On immigration, he kind of ran hard right. I don't know if he said anything about abortion. I think by and large in these campaigns, what these independents can do is largely just try to avoid social issues. If you're in a deep red state and you go progressive on social issues, depending on which one it is, of course, it could actually come back to bite you in the ass and you could do really bad. Like I'm thinking of when Beto O'Rourke was like, yeah, we're coming to take your guns. And then, never a chance again in the state of Texas, right? When he almost beat Ted Cruz the first time. Shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have said that because that just doesn't work in that state. So on social issues, either be agnostic, don't talk about it much at all, or pick and choose your battles very carefully. But on economic issues, you could go as far left as you fucking want because these ideas are genuinely popular. If you're talking about taxing the rich, if you're talking about redistributing, if you're talking about raising the minimum wage, you're talking about universal health care, you're talking about broad unionization, all that shit is popular. And so I think what Bernie's saying here is in red states where the Democratic brand is absolutely tarnished, and basically you don't even have Democrats running, why wouldn't you run as an independent and just go hardcore populist on economic issues and run against both parties? That could be a recipe for success. And then what happens is, once you get to Congress or to the Senate, you can caucus with the Democrats, just like Bernie Sanders does, because you're going to agree more with the Democrats, certainly on economic issues. It's sort of like flipping the Joe Manchin model. The Joe Manchin model is, hey, you are a Democratic senator from a deep red state. So how did you end up winning? And what Joe Manchin would say is, look, I just went to the right on a number of issues. His voting record was literally 50% Democrat, 50% Republican. So he's like, look, I'm just sort of like directly in between the two parties, both on economic issues and on social issues. But I think it's a misnomer that in order for a candidate like that to win in a red state, that's what you have to do. I actually think what's much more popular is what Dan Osborne did, which is like, go as far left as you fucking want on economics. Be as populist as you want on economics. But on social issues, pick and choose your battles or be agnostic or even in some instances go to the right. So that I think is more popular. Again, 47% of the vote in the state of Nebraska, a state that wouldn't vote for a Democrat in a million fucking years. So there is a lesson to take away there. There absolutely is. But I'm sure Bernie would admit that this model works in certain contexts where it doesn't work at the presidential level for reasons we already discussed. It doesn't work in blue states because you're going to split the vote and then allow the Republican to win. There are instances where it doesn't work, but I see nothing wrong with this idea of in red states where Democrats aren't even running, have independents run super populist. And look, I don't think this is a fluke. I think that you can repeat this in other red states and get very close, and in some instances, at some point in time, win. Especially now, I think the Republican brand is about to be tarnished to the high heavens like it was in the George W. Bush era, because I think Trump is going to fuck this up 1,000 ways to Sunday. That is a brilliant idea. That is a brilliant idea. And so if the Democrats are struggling in many of these states across the country, you could pick off 2, 3, 4, 5 states by using this model. So I think it's a great idea. I also think it's not particularly all that revolutionary, right? He brings it up like this is an amazing thing. Stay tuned. There's going to be big. And it's like sort of like the most obvious idea you've ever heard in your life, right? So anyway, there you have it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.